In this video, we're going deep dive one of the most important fundamental principles in all of freestyle snowboarding. That is popping. Your favorite snowboarder does it, every pro does it. Anyone hitting a rail, jump, or riding a cliff in the backcountry is using this fundamental principle, and you're about to learn every single thing there is to know about it. So let's jump right into it. Let's start simple. What is a pop? A pop is referring to just trying to maintain contact with your board and the takeoff of the feature until it snaps off the end, matching the angle of the takeoff the whole way, not letting your board flex. We're doing this because that's going to give us the most air, the most control, and then we're trying to go and keep it a smaller motion when we're not flexing our board because that gives us the largest surface to work with while letting us keep our upper body in a neutral position. A neutral position is really important when going and hitting a jump because that's what lets you bring up your legs, get control. Whenever you're going and hitting a jump, doing a rotation, you're trying to keep your weight set at the same point. So even as I'm flailing here, my center of mass is set over that same point I took off on. And that is the goal of the pop, to fully utilize your snowboard while maintaining the same centered point. And it starts to give you a lot more air the smaller the feature. So here, I'll be honest, this one's a little bit like an ollie, and that's because I'm trying to really maximize this motion. And because this feature is so small, it's giving me a lot of extra air time. So if I went and jumped with both feet at the same time, I'd be leaving off around there, where my tail is still making contact. But by extending this motion all the way through, I'm able to go and get this whole extra board length of height without even leaving the ground. And this is how you get so much height on a snowboard, even off of small bumps. So I'm coming in, loading up, and I shift my weight slightly to my back foot. You want to do this weight shift as you're going and squatting down, and then as you extend, you want to shift your weight back to center. This is because the only reason you're shifting to your back foot is in order to maintain pressure on your tail. But if you leave off the takeoff with yourself still angled towards that back foot, there's going to be nothing that will throw you up and over. In order to fully do this pop, we need to keep a little bit of weight on our toe edge. Not so much that we're going and starting to lean forward and dig in. We still need our weight completely centered over our board, but we want a little bit of edge pressure, especially for little side hits like this, in order to go and keep traction with the snow and keep popping off that point. If your board's flat base, it won't have grip, so it's going to slip around, and if that happens as you're trying to push power through it, it's not going to let you push that power through the same set point. And that's a really important part of this. You're trying to go and set your edge, set your weight in that stacked position, and then push from that position, all when maintaining the same balance point. That said, you can go and shift a little bit to flat base. As I go and extend my legs, I'm actually getting my board less on that edge and less angled, making it so I'm taking off more and more flat base. This is because I'm getting enough force and traction on my board, and it's for a short enough period of time, I don't need to worry about it kicking weird. So I can go and flatten base in order to do what? Keep my body more straight over top of my snowboard. The more weight you're putting straight down into that tail, the more it's going to pop you up. If you have weight to lean forward, you have weight a little bit on that edge, it's not going to give you as clean of an up and down pop, they'll give you that extra height. Here, you'll notice that my chest is open 90. This is because I'm going into a banked feature. And in order to prepare for this, I'm just opening my chest to make it so my board naturally pulls up to the angle I'm trying to land in. And that's really the key to going and getting these pops. Pushing into the jump, fully riding off the feature. Mikey Cicerelli, making great tutorials by the way, go check him out, is talking about shaping your board to the feature. You want to imagine your board going and merging with the feature, connecting, and going and molding onto it as it pops off, making it an extension. So here you can see I'm coming up on a very high angle, not much transition, and I'm letting my board warp around the takeoff, making it so I can maintain contact and make sure my board's connected with it as long as possible. And we're going to compare that to the clip on the right, a two-footed jump. So here I'm using the same principles of extending, bringing everything together, and popping off my board. The only difference is I'm not letting myself first shift back. This is making it so as I go and pop up, my weight is evenly distributed between both my feet. So as I go and extend, what happens is you start leaving off both feet at the same time. This will do one thing, and it's going to go and make it so your tail leaves off at the same time as your front foot. The reason why this is such a problem for jumping on your snowboard is because of two things. First, it's not fully utilizing the feature. If I would have pushed through this feature, I would have been able to keep my board in contact up into this point, and that would have put me another half a board length in the air before popping off the end. That's like a whole extra 1.5 feet of air I missed by letting my board come up early. And the second thing that's happening is both legs are extending at exactly the same time. When both your legs are extended in their max pushed out position, it's going to make it so your upper body becomes completely straight. When you have a straight upper body, you lose the ability to keep your weight set over the balls of your feet, that stacked point. So even though we're taking off in that stacked point, as we go and push up, it's actually pushing us slightly back into a neutral position. When you're this tall and extended, it's making it so it's going to be really hard to keep the core connected. Where if we compare that to the pop, you can see that I'm going and shifting my weight onto that back foot slightly, going and molding my board into that transition, and as I do that, I let my upper body come forward. So my front leg straight, still a little bit of bend in my back leg, and my upper body is now pulling back to this neutral position. And then as the board snaps off the snow, that little bit of kick is actually what shoots your legs back up to you and shoots your board back out to even. That's why it's so important when you're doing this to get the right timing to go and snap off the end of the lip. Because when you're doing something like an ollie, you're generating that snap, that force yourself through flexing the board. But when you're doing a pop, you're not trying to flex your board. So that means in order to get that snap, you need to make sure you're pushing off the end of the jump, and that's what gives that snap motion. But this is so beneficial because of right here, this little bit of hinge in the hips. It doesn't look like much compared to this, but I'm telling you, this is everything. This lets me keep my core engaged, and by keeping my core engaged, it lets my legs come up to me. And that's going to be crucial for going and bringing in your grabs, bringing in your tricks, and generating your spins. And just looking at an effect now that it has in the air, if we go and watch through, you can see that I'm having a moment of weightlessness right here. My arms are up, my core is fully extended, my legs are completely straight. If we compare that to the peak of the jump on the left, you can see my legs are bent up, my core is ready, I'm already positioning myself to get into that landing. And that's why we're going and doing this tail and doing this rock forward motion, because it goes and makes it so your weight is transferring throughout your board, allowing you to keep your core tight, and you're not relying on fully extending in order to get that power. Because if you fully extend, it leaves you without a connected body, and that's going to make it so your legs fall behind a little bit. So you can see, I bring my legs up and I get them up to me, but I have that moment where I'm fully extended and weightless. If you go and have that moment when you messed up the takeoff, got bucked, it's going to go and really exaggerate that, and you'll need to really flail to get back together. So the goal of the pop here is really to try get into the air with as little funk as possible, and with as much height as possible. So here we have a heel side approach, and the heel side is a little bit different. First, I want you to notice that I'm not coming in on my heel edge. Even though this is a heel edge approach feature, I'm coming in my stacked on toe position. What I'm doing instead of getting on my heel edge is angling my whole board towards the feature. This is going to make it so I don't need to ride as long on the heel edge. What's good, because I don't care how good you are, less time on the heel edge is easier to control. And then I start to transition to my heel edge at a really crucial spot, right here at the spoon of the jump. The reason why I don't want to be at heels at this point is because this is the highest G-force part of the jump, and when you're on more of an edge, more pressure gets put onto that single point. So if I was on a heel edge coming into something this steep, it's going to put more pressure on me and make it more likely that I'll go and sit backwards, losing that stacked position that's going to let me pop up. So the solution is to come in on a toe edge, and then once you start getting onto that uphill pitch, you went and already absorbed the transition, that's when you go and start to switch to that heel edge. And then from there, I enter this heel edge stack position. It's slightly different from a toe edge stack position because you can't use your shins and you can't push your hips forward in order to keep more weight on that point with holding that edge, making it so you need to rely on more bend in the legs. So the reason why I'm more crouched down here, a little bit weird of a form, is because I'm on that heel edge and I have an awkward angle. But my weight is still set straight over that heels, and my upper body is going to do the same thing. It's going to shift slightly back. Right here, you can see it slightly back, and then as I go and extend my legs, my upper body comes back to neutral. That, combined with the kick of the feature, goes and snaps me off. And here you can see that I'm not actually riding all the way to the top of the feature, but I'm still popping and getting that snap off the tail of the board. So here I could have been a little more patient, got a little more height, but that's not taking everything into account, because the reason why I went and made it so my board popped up a little early is because the transition's short. And that's a thing. The only reason you're trying to go and ride to the end of a feature and fully use your board is to get maximum height. If you don't need that much height, you can go and use a little more bend, use a little bit of an ollie to let yourself pop before that point in order to give you a more controllable air. Here, we have a really nice pop off a jump, and you can tell it's a perfect pop because I don't need to do anything in the air. I pop it, and the angle of the jump naturally sinks me up into the angle of the landing. And this is the goal every time you go and hit a jump, to have your takeoff naturally sink you up into the landing so you don't need to make any micro adjustments. So how are we achieving this? As you go from the flat to uphill transition through a jump, you get the most G-force right here at that transition point. And when we're going through a transition point, we want to make sure that we're keeping our weight off that edge as much as possible, because that's going to let us go and push more pressure into the center of our board. And if we're on an edge and there's more pressure, it's going to go and load it, causing our board to turn off more. So I go flat base through that point, and then I enter a very slight bit of edge pressure. So here it looks like I'm riding off completely flat base. The key difference is I'm slightly gripping the snow on my toe edge because I'm letting my upper body come up and over as my legs go down. So if you have no bend in your legs, you can stay completely straight. But any bit of bend in your legs is going to put your hips back. And as your hips go back, in order to keep your center of mass at the same point, your upper body needs to go forward. So because I have a little bit of bend in my legs, in order to keep my balance point at the same spot, I need to let the upper body come over in the same amount in correlation to the legs. So the more power you're trying to go and get out of a jump, the more you're going to squat down. The more you squat down, the more the hips go back and the upper body comes forward, because you're trying to maintain the same balance point through the in-run, through the takeoff, through the air, and into the landing. Because keeping that single balance point is what lets you get in the air with that core control. You can imagine if you're changing your balance point, like let's say I went off this takeoff and switched into going off my heels last second. That's going to go and do a couple things. First, it's going to make it so my pressure, instead of being here, would be set here. To correspond this, I need to go and put my hips out more, upper body more, and that'd make it so when I pop up, my legs would go and get pushed forward as my upper body gets pushed back, disconnecting me. So the reason why we're trying to keep our balance point over this position specifically is twofold. First, a little bit of toe edge is nice for gripping snow. You can see the takeoff isn't perfectly smooth. All these little grooves and divots are going to do a lot to go and bump you and move you off track. So that little bit of edge helps you grip in and make sure that funk doesn't get you. It also keeps your weight very over top of your board, making it so all of your power, all that G-force, all that snap is being driven straight down instead of across. If we go and leave this takeoff with edge pressure this way, that's going to make it so the power is pushing us that way, pushing us this way. But if we go and make sure that we're taking off as flat based as possible, that's going to push us up completely, making it so all of our power is being used to go upwards with the arc of a jump and not being wasted going to the side and getting crossed. That's why I actually get more flat based as I extend my legs. As I extend my legs, that's making it so I have less bend in them. If I have less bend in my legs, my torso doesn't need to be as over my toes. This lets me go, and as I go and push through the extension, I'm able to go and get taller, flattening that base and getting an even smoother takeoff. But I'm never going and getting fully extended. Even though my legs look completely straight here, they're still like a passive straight. They're not locked out. And we can tell they're not locked out because I'm still able to keep that little bit of forward position in my upper body. If you go and let your legs get fully locked out, get the body fully straight, it's going to do like we saw in the side hit and give you that moment of unbalanced. So if you do have any flaws with the takeoff, it's going to throw you off. What I'm telling myself every time I do this pop is to get into my stack position and push off the tail while trying to keep everything connected in the core, in the board. We're just trying to not have any chest opening, any funk, any closing. just no funk. We're trying to keep as smooth and steady of a body posture as possible. Now, let's talk a little bit about ollies and how this differs from pops, because I get what you're saying. Leaning back, pushing off a tail, it sounds a lot like an ollie. The difference with an ollie is that it's a full motion, where you go and start over your front foot, shift to your back foot, and explode off that tail, relying on the snap of a board. So here, I'm using an ollie off a very kicky jump, and we can tell it's an ollie right here. See how my board's going and curving upwards? This is going to give me the most possible power, but it has the massive downside of being a very committed point. See how at this point here, my front foot is leaving off the takeoff a little bit sooner than necessary? This is making it so I have more power and more pressure being put into a smaller part of my snowboard. And I don't know if you know about balancing, but think about standing on one of your toes. The less surface area you have, the more it's going to be susceptible to your surroundings, and it's going to be hard to hold your balance. So when you're going and doing an ollie, it's harder to stay balanced, and you're flexing your board, so it's going to kick you a lot harder. And that's the beauty of the ollie and why we want to use it on some features, because it goes and kicks up your board to you. But when you use it on a jump, it takes a little bit of time to pull everything back together because you did such a big motion and you have so much G-force to control. Here is a perfect feature that you'd want to use an ollie. I'm going and preemptively ollieing so I can pop up and boost into that transition at the end. This is because the landing's super short and I don't want to land flat. So I'm going, using my ollie motion, rocking from the front foot to the back foot. And notice here how in order to do this, I need to be really extended and my torso is more tall. This is because I need to really generate a lot of power into that tail to make it snap off the end. And the only way to do that is to get max extension. As you go and extend yourself, it makes it so your joints are more strong, everything's more strong. Like if you're trying to hold something up, would you rather hold it in a full squat, or would you rather hold it with this straighter legged position, locking your legs? That makes it so more power gets pushed into that tail, and then it goes and gets bounced back. When you have a little bit of bend in your legs, it's going to absorb a little bit of that power. And that's going to really impact an ollie because you're trying to rely on that power to flex that board to get you that takeoff, that pop, that'll bring your everything together. So that's why ollies are really good for side hits, controlling speeds, but you don't want to use them off jumps because it goes and has all those problems and becomes really hard to time. And this is the best showcase of how effective the pop is. Here, I'm literally just riding, not extending my legs at all, just maintaining contact with my board and the snow. And you can see, just by maintaining contact, it naturally puts my front foot over top of a rail. So just by going and maintaining contact into the end of a feature and hitting the feature with enough speed to get like 30-50% down, you can hit most rails in most parks without ever needing to pop. And this is so beneficial because if you don't need to pop, you don't need to extend your legs, allowing you to hold your stacked position. So here, I'm literally holding the same position through the takeoff, through the air, onto the feature, and through the landing. My upper body, my legs, my center of balance is not changing until I go into a absorb that landing. Here we have the problem with the coast, and that is if you let yourself get G'd out, it's going to go and actually absorb the takeoff, throwing you off balance. So here I'm letting my legs bend up. And the reason why this is a problem is right here. See my nose drooping down. This is making it so I'm no longer going up on the same angle of the takeoff, but instead I'm drooping forward, and that's going to make it so my weight is being sent over my front foot. And when that happens, you need to use a readjustment in order to not nose pick, making it so you don't get full pop, you don't get full control. Here is an exaggerated example. In this one, I'm actually going and sucking down lower as I get off the takeoff. This is making it so my tail lifts off early because I'm not pushing through the jump. It doesn't know when to snap off, and it's making it so I'm absorbing the lip of the jump, and that's making my board even out early, but it's going to go and throw us over that nose. So that's going and putting me through the jump and not putting me on the right jump angle. And if you're not on the right angle, you need to go and make adjustments. This is why popping is also so important for every single spin you do on your snowboard. You can't go and do an ollie when you're going and doing a spin. That's because ollies require a body motion and every one of your spins requires a body motion. So if you want to ollie with one, you need to combine two motions into one, and it's really hard. So here on this front side 360, you can see I'm maintaining contact with the takeoff until my tail snaps off the end. I'm going and keeping my upper body set over my toes so my center of balance is at that same point. But I get what you're saying, but you're leaving off your heels. I'm trying to leave as flat base as possible, and I'm trying to go and preemptively set my weight as flat base as possible, because when you land a frontside 360, your weight needs to be on your toe edge. So yes, I'm leaving off my heels, but I'm trying to position my body, position my core to go and leave as centered as possible, just getting enough heel pressure to hold the line and flattening it out as I go and extend the spin, to the extent that you can go and pre-spin backside a little bit. This has been such a game changer for me, because it now makes it so I'm not completely reliant on the angle of my takeoff in order to not drift, allowing me to get a lot more power. So on this backside 360, I'm getting on my toe edge through the spoon of the jump, and you can see that I'm on my toe edge here. But as I go and throw the spin, I'm actually letting myself go and become more tall, allowing me to flatten that edge. And when I'm flattening that edge, it's letting me go and pop off with less edge pressure. This is really important because it lets me go and take off in the super stacked upright position. If you take off with edge pressure, it's going to make it so you're leaning to match that angle. So the more you pre-spin, the more you lean, the more your weight is going to be rotating around your head. And you really want your rotation to be set around your balls of your feet. Because as I'm doing this backside 360, watch what happens when I bring my legs up. My upper body goes forward in correlation to my hips going back, keeping my center of mass set over the same point over the balls of my feet. What this does is it lets me keep my core engaged for the full rotation, allowing me to lead with my upper body and seamlessly utilize counter rotation. And that's only possible through making sure you keep a strong connected core. This gets even more true as you start moving on to bigger spins. So here, toe edge. And as I go and snap the spin, start extending. Remember, as you extend your legs, that means you don't need as much angle in the torso because your hips aren't back as much, allowing you to keep your center point even with a taller posture. But then the difference is when you go and start doing bigger tricks like this, you're now trying to go and match your whole angle of rotation over that back foot. So I'm going and shifting my weight to my back foot and setting my whole upper body over it. This is because that will go and put me up with the angle of the jump, and it will go and make it so I go and continue that rotational axis that will put me into the landing. That's why I can land perfect 2 feet at the same time like this. And how am I landing? Weight set over that same point of the ball as my feet. First, you need to make sure you're hitting your stack position. Your stack position depends on who you are, but you're trying to keep your weight set over your edge with as little edge pressure as possible, allowing yourself to stay as tall as possible. The more you squat down, the more your legs will need to bend, and the more you'll need to hinge forward. But you need a little bit of bend in order to go and push into your snowboard, because you need that range of motion in the knees in order to go and actually get that pushing feeling. From there, you're trying to push for your snowboard while keeping your center of balance set over the exact same point. We don't want our center of balance to be shifting. You can go and flatten it out a little bit as you go and get flatter, because that's going to make it so you pop off of less of the edge. And here, watch these frames. This is a prime example of pushing off a lip. See how my board is going and snapping down right there. It's one frame. It's here, and then it's down. And that's showing us that I'm putting so much pressure into my tail, I'm pushing so hard into it that my board's actually snapping off the end. So this might be a little bit of an over snap, but even as I'm going and pushing that hard, this is the power of the stack position and the pop. I'm not going and needing to go and lift my upper body. So the reason why this is so important for power and getting control, getting big airs, is because I'm able to go and get maximum power, maximum force off the jump, but without needing to lift, allowing me to keep my center of balance at the same point from the takeoff into the air. This lets you go and use that pop and bring everything together because you have no point of being disconnected. And from there, because you got a good pop, you're on the perfect angle of the jump, so you don't need to use your upper body, your legs, or anything to readjust. And then you have so much extra control from going up and having your only momentum being up and over that it doesn't matter if you go big, need to readjust, because your airtime travel is so smooth, so consistent, it's easy to control and adjust. So even here, going this big, watch my upper body. Even though my legs shift down, I poke out, my center of balance is staying over the same point. I go and extend my legs, but I'm still keeping my center of balance over my toes. All this adjustment, all this funk, and my center of balance is over the same spot. And this makes it so when I hit the landing, my edge is able to grip in, making sure that I don't get any funky business coming down on the landing, because if you go land flat base on a little bump here, there's something here, it will throw you off. So we're trying to land on that little bit of edge pressure, and then as I go and squat down and absorb it, I let my chest come down as my hips go out. Here you can see I'm not doing it completely perfect because I'm getting more and more pressure onto my toe edge. Ideally, your center of balance is staying at exactly the same point. I'll leave you with this one final note. Every motion you do in snowboarding is going to try break your stack position, be it carving, be it rails, be it spins. If you open your hips, it's going to go and change the variables you need for a stack position. But it's through working through your stack position, figuring out how to go and wind up, load up, and explode off your tail, all when maintaining that same center of balance. That's what gives you control, and that's what gives you power. So if you're struggling with your straight airs, you're struggling with your turns, you're struggling with any part in your snowboarding, think about your positioning, think about how your body's moving, and ask yourself, am I maintaining a stack position through this whole range of motion? If you're doing a frontside board slide and slipping out, ask yourself, are you completely in the same balance point through the whole trick? If you're doing a spin and lose balance, ask yourself, am I going and doing anything that's throwing off my balance at any point? You do that and train it, and it will make you a fantastic snowboarder that can shred any terrain and do any trick.